Once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Women don't move toward intimacy for the reasons you've been told your whole life. It's not just about how you look, it's not just about how much money you make, and it's definitely not about how hard you try to impress her. Those are surface-level ideas, easy explanations, the kind of answers people give when they don't actually understand what's happening beneath the surface. But reality is deeper, quieter, more psychological than most men are prepared to admit. Because when a woman chooses to be close to a man, truly close, it's rarely about one thing. It's about a combination of forces working together, forces that most men ignore or completely misunderstand. Think about your own experience. Maybe you've seen a woman who seemed interested one day and distant the next. Maybe you've wondered why she chose another man who, on paper, didn't seem better than you, less attractive, less successful, less polished. And instead of finding a real answer, you told yourself something simple. Women are confusing. But that's not the truth. That's an escape. Because the truth requires you to look deeper, and once you do, everything changes. Women aren't confusing, they're responding to signals you haven't learned to see yet. And once you understand those signals, you stop guessing, you stop chasing, you start seeing clearly. You start understanding why attraction appears and why it disappears, why one man is ignored while another is desired without trying, why sometimes it feels effortless and other times it feels impossible. Because beneath the surface, there are hidden drivers shaping every decision she makes. And the first one most men get completely wrong is physical desire. Most men grow up believing a very simple story. If she's attracted to you physically, everything else will follow. It sounds logical, it sounds clean, it feels controllable. Go to the gym, dress better, improve your appearance, become more attractive. And yes, those things matter, but not in the way you think, because physical desire is not the finish line, it's the entry point. It gets her attention, but it doesn't keep it. It creates curiosity, but it doesn't guarantee connection. And this is where most men make their first mistake. They treat attraction like a static thing, like a switch that turns on and stays on. But attraction isn't static, it's fluid. It rises, it falls, it responds to emotional context, mental stimulation, and the energy you bring into the interaction. A woman might notice you because of how you look, but she decides what happens next based on how you make her feel. That feeling, subtle, often unspoken, is what determines whether curiosity turns into desire or fades into nothing. And here's where it gets even more important. Unlike men, whose attraction is often consistent and visually driven, women's desire is influenced by multiple layers at once: her mood, her emotional state, her level of comfort, the environment, the way you carry yourself. All of it matters. You could be physically attractive and still create no desire, or you could be average in appearance and create a strong pull simply through presence. That's not theory, that's reality. Because what she feels around you matters more than what she sees. Your calmness, your confidence, your ability to stay grounded. These things don't show up in a mirror, but they show up in her experience of you. And her experience is what drives her decisions. Think about it like this. Two men walk into a room. One is well-dressed, physically impressive, clearly trying to stand out. The other is quieter, less flashy, but composed, present, unaffected. The first man tries to capture attention. The second man doesn't need to. And more often than not, it's the second man who creates deeper attraction. Not because he looks better, but because he feels different. There's no pressure in him, no need to prove anything, no anxiety leaking through his behavior. And that absence of need creates space. Space for her to feel comfortable, space for her to lean in, space for curiosity to grow. Because here's something most men don't realize. When you're trying too hard to be attractive, you actually reduce attraction. Because effort, when it comes from insecurity, feels like pressure, and pressure kills desire. But presence builds it. A man who is grounded in himself doesn't need constant validation. He doesn't chase reactions. He doesn't overthink every word. He simply exists in the moment with control over himself. And that self-control communicates something powerful without saying a single word. I am stable. I am not desperate. I am not here to impress. I am here to experience. And that energy shifts everything, because now she's not reacting to your appearance, she's responding to your presence, and presence is what turns initial attraction into something deeper. This is why you've probably seen situations that didn't make sense. A woman choosing a man who isn't the most attractive in the room, staying interested in someone who doesn't fit the typical ideal, walking away from someone who looks perfect on paper. From the outside, it looks random, but it's not. It's driven by internal experience, not external traits. And once you understand that, you stop focusing only on how you look and start focusing on how you feel and how that feeling transfers to her. Because whether you realize it or not, she's constantly reading you, not just your words, not just your actions, but your emotional state, your tension, your calmness, your certainty, or your doubt. If you're anxious, she feels it. If you're trying too hard, she senses it. If you're grounded, she relaxes around it. And that relaxation is where attraction begins to grow. Not in the surface level traits, but in the emotional environment you create. That environment determines whether she opens up or shuts down, whether she leans in or pulls away, whether curiosity becomes connection or disappears completely. And this is why physical desire alone is never enough. It's fragile. It can fade quickly if it's not supported by something deeper. Because looks might start the interaction, but they don't sustain it. What sustains it is emotional experience, the way she feels in your presence, the sense of ease or tension, the level of comfort or uncertainty, and that's something you can't fake. It comes from who you are, not what you show. So when you start understanding attraction this way, something shifts. You stop obsessing over external perfection. You stop chasing approval. You stop trying to win her attention. And instead, you start focusing on your internal state, your calmness, your clarity, your control. Because those are the things that actually shape how she experiences you. And once you get that, everything changes. You're no longer reacting. You're no longer guessing. You're no longer confused by mixed signals, because you understand something deeper than most men ever do. Attraction isn't built on what she sees. It's built on what she feels. And what she feels begins with you.
There is something deeper than attraction that most men never take the time to understand. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up in obvious ways. And yet, it controls everything that follows. A woman can notice you. She can be curious about you. She can even feel a level of pull toward you. But if this one element is missing, everything slows down. Everything becomes uncertain. And eventually, everything fades. That element is emotional safety. Not the kind that's loud or exaggerated, not the kind that needs to be explained or proven with words. The kind that is felt, quietly, consistently, without effort. For a woman, intimacy doesn't begin where most men think it does. It doesn't begin with physical closeness. It doesn't begin with attraction alone. And it definitely doesn't begin with logic. It begins in her internal world. In the way she interprets your presence, in the way her mind processes who you are, in the way her body reacts to the signals you give off. Because before she moves closer, she evaluates. Not consciously in most cases, but instinctively. She reads your tone, your reactions, your patience, your ability to stay composed. And through all of that, she's asking one silent question. Am I safe here? Not just physically, emotionally, psychologically, energetically. Can she speak freely without being judged? Can she express herself without being dismissed? Can she open up without having it used against her later? These are not small questions. They are foundational. Because if the answer is no, even slightly, her behavior begins to shift. She becomes more guarded, more reserved, less expressive. Not because she doesn't feel anything, but because she doesn't feel safe enough to show it. And that's where most men get confused. They think attraction disappeared. They think interest faded. They think they did something wrong on the surface. But what actually happened is deeper. The environment changed. And when the environment changes, her response changes with it. You have to understand this clearly. A woman cannot fully open herself, emotionally or physically, if she feels tension in your presence. Tension doesn't always look like conflict. Sometimes it's subtle. A slight pressure in your tone, an impatience in your reactions, a tendency to interrupt, correct, or dismiss. Even small things matter. Because her mind doesn't ignore those signals, it collects them. It builds a picture of who you are and how safe it is to be around you. And once that picture forms, it becomes very difficult to change. Because emotional safety is not built through words. It's built through consistency, through repeated experiences that tell her over time, you can relax here. You don't need to protect yourself. You are not being evaluated. And when she begins to feel that, something shifts. Her guard lowers, her tone softens, her presence becomes warmer, and her desire starts to grow naturally. Not forced, not manipulated, not calculated. Just a natural response to the environment you created. This is why many men fail without understanding why. They focus on doing more, saying more, trying harder, thinking that effort alone will create results. But effort, when it's driven by neediness or pressure, creates the opposite effect. It makes her feel like she has to respond, like she's being pushed towards something instead of choosing it freely. And that feeling, being pushed, destroys safety. Because now she's not relaxed. She's alert. She's evaluating. She's holding back. Even if she doesn't say it, even if she smiles, even if she stays. Internally, she's not open. And without openness, intimacy cannot deepen. You see, emotional safety is not about being soft. It's not about agreeing with everything she says. It's not about removing all tension from the interaction. It's about control. Your control. Your ability to stay steady regardless of what's happening. Your ability to respond instead of react. Your ability to hold your frame without forcing it. Because when you are emotionally unpredictable, she becomes cautious. If your mood shifts quickly, she notices. If your reactions are intense, she feels it. If your behavior is inconsistent, she adjusts herself to protect her own stability. And that adjustment creates distance. But when you are steady, when your reactions are measured, when your presence remains calm even when situations change, something different happens. She begins to trust the environment. Not just trust you, but trust how she feels around you. And that trust is what allows her to open, to speak more freely, to share more deeply, to move closer without hesitation, because she knows that what she gives will not be used against her. This is a level most men never reach, not because it's complicated, but because it requires discipline. It requires awareness. It requires you to look at yourself instead of constantly focusing on her. Because emotional safety is not something you ask for, it's something you become. Through your behavior, through your consistency, through your presence over time. Think about how this plays out in real situations. A conversation where she shares something personal. If you interrupt, correct, or minimize it, you create distance. If you listen, without trying to fix, without trying to dominate, you create safety. A moment where there's tension or disagreement. If you react emotionally, raise your voice, or become defensive, you create instability. If you stay calm, grounded, and clear, you create trust. And these moments add up. They build the foundation of how she experiences you. Because she's not just paying attention to what you say, she's paying attention to how you handle pressure, how you handle discomfort, how you handle her. And through all of that, she decides, again, often unconsciously, whether to open or close. This is why some men feel like they're always close, but never fully there. Because they create attraction, but not safety. They spark interest, but not trust. And without trust, attraction has nowhere to go. It remains surface level, temporary, unstable. But when safety is present, attraction deepens. It becomes more than curiosity, more than excitement. It becomes connection. And connection is what sustains everything that follows. It's what keeps her engaged even when things aren't perfect. It's what allows her to stay open even when there are challenges. It's what turns moments into something meaningful instead of forgettable. Because at the end of the day, a woman doesn't just respond to how you look, she responds to how you make her feel. And the way you make her feel is shaped by your internal state, your stability, your presence, your ability to create an environment where she doesn't need to guard herself, where she doesn't need to overthink, where she doesn't need to question your intentions. Just a quiet sense of ease, a feeling that doesn't need explanation, a calm that allows everything else to unfold naturally. And when that calm exists, everything changes. Her energy changes. Her behavior changes. Her level of openness changes. Because now she's not protecting herself. She's expressing herself. And expression is where connection begins to deepen. Not through force, not through strategy, but through the simple reality that she feels safe enough to be real. And that is what most men never understand. Not because it's hidden, but because it's subtle. It doesn't show up in obvious ways. It doesn't come with clear signals. But once you see it, once you recognize it, you start to notice patterns you never noticed before. You start to understand why certain interactions worked and others didn't. Why some moments felt natural and others felt forced. Because beneath everything, this one element was either present or missing. And when it's present, everything else becomes easier. Not guaranteed, not automatic, but aligned. Aligned in a way that allows connection to grow without resistance. And when there is no resistance, there is flow. And when there is flow, everything that once felt complicated becomes simple.
There's a layer of attraction that most men never even consider because it doesn't look like attraction at all. It doesn't announce itself with obvious signals, it doesn't rely on words, and it doesn't demand attention, but it quietly shapes how a woman feels about you over time. And if you miss it, you miss the part that actually sustains connection. Because beyond desire, beyond emotional comfort, there is something even more subtle that keeps her engaged: connection. Not the surface-level kind, not the forced kind, not the kind built on constant talking or trying to impress. A deeper connection that is built through presence, shared moments, and something most men underestimate: physical closeness outside of intimacy. Most men think touch is the end result, something that happens after attraction is established, something that belongs only in private moments. But that's not how it works. For a woman, touch is not just an outcome, it's a language, a continuous signal that communicates how she is valued, how she is seen, and how close she feels to you. And when that language disappears, the connection weakens, even if everything else looks fine on the surface. You have to understand this clearly. A woman doesn't separate emotional connection and physical closeness the way most men do. For her, they are intertwined. Each one reinforces the other, and when they are aligned, everything feels natural. But when one is missing, the other begins to fade. This is why you'll often see relationships where everything seems okay, no major problems, no obvious conflict, and yet something feels off. There's distance, silence, a lack of energy that wasn't there before. And most men respond to this by trying to fix things with words. They ask questions, they try to talk more, they try to explain. But what's missing isn't always something that can be explained. Sometimes what's missing is felt. And one of the strongest ways that feeling is maintained is through consistent, natural physical presence. Not dramatic, not forced, not exaggerated. Simple. A hand on your back as you walk, a brief touch on your arm during conversation, a moment of closeness that doesn't ask for anything in return. These small actions might seem insignificant, but to her, they are signals. Signals that say, I am here, I am connected to you, I see you. And when those signals are consistent, something powerful happens. She relaxes into the connection. She feels secure. She feels desired, not just in moments of intensity, but in everyday life. And that everyday feeling is what keeps attraction alive. Because attraction is not just built in big moments, it's built in small ones, repeated over time. Moments that don't demand attention, but quietly reinforce the bond between you. This is why absence of touch can create distance without either person fully realizing why. Nothing happens, there's no argument, no clear reason, just a slow shift, a subtle feeling that something is missing. And that feeling grows over time, until one day the connection that once felt natural feels forced. And when it becomes forced, it begins to fade. Because real connection cannot be maintained through effort alone. It requires consistency. It requires awareness. It requires you to understand that what seems small is often what matters most. Think about how this plays out over time. In the beginning, touch is natural, effortless, unconscious. You reach for her without thinking. You stay close without planning it. There's no hesitation, no overthinking. And because of that, everything feels alive. But as time passes, many men become less aware. They assume the connection is already established. They assume it will maintain itself. And slowly, those small moments disappear. Not intentionally, just gradually. And as they disappear, something else begins to fade with them. Her sense of closeness, her feeling of being desired, her emotional connection to you. Because while words can reassure, touch reinforces. Words can be forgotten. Touch is remembered. It leaves an impression that goes beyond logic, beyond explanation. It's felt in a way that words cannot replace. And when it's consistent, it builds a foundation that is difficult to break. A sense of closeness that remains even in silence, even in routine, even in moments where nothing is happening. This is why understanding the role of physical presence is so important, not in an exaggerated way, not in a performative way, but in a natural, grounded way that aligns with who you are. Because forced behavior is always noticeable. It creates discomfort instead of connection. But genuine presence creates ease. It feels real. It feels effortless. And that's what allows her to respond naturally, without pressure, without expectation, just a quiet alignment between what she feels and what you express. And that alignment is what strengthens connection over time. Because connection is not built once, it is maintained through repeated signals, through consistent behavior, through an awareness of what keeps the bond alive. And one of the strongest signals you can give is presence through touch, not just in moments of intensity, but in everyday life, in normal moments, in quiet interactions that don't seem important, but are. Because those moments accumulate, they build something deeper than attraction, something that doesn't rely on constant excitement, something that remains steady even when things are calm. And that steadiness is what allows everything else to grow. But connection is not only influenced by what happens between you. There are forces outside of you that shape her decisions in ways you may not immediately see. Forces that don't come from you, but still affect how she responds to you. Social expectations, cultural influences, the opinions of others, the invisible pressure of how she believes she should behave. These factors don't always show themselves directly, but they exist, quietly influencing how she thinks, how she feels, how she decides. Because no one exists in isolation. Everyone is shaped to some degree by the environment around them. And for a woman, that environment can sometimes create internal conflict between what she feels and what she believes she should do. between what she wants and what she thinks is expected of her. And when that conflict exists, her behavior can become unpredictable, not because she is inconsistent, but because she is navigating multiple influences at once. You might see interest followed by hesitation, openness followed by withdrawal, closeness followed by distance. And without understanding the external factors at play, it can feel confusing. But there is a pattern, even if it's not immediately visible. Because her decisions are not made in a vacuum. They are shaped by experiences, expectations, and sometimes pressure. Pressure to behave a certain way, pressure to meet certain standards, pressure to align with what others might think. And that pressure can influence how she expresses attraction, how she responds to connection, how quickly she allows things to develop. This doesn't mean her feelings are not real. It means they are being filtered through layers of thought, expectation, and perception. And those layers can create hesitation even when the underlying feeling is there. This is why understanding connection requires more than observing behavior. It requires awareness of the context around it, the environment, the influences, the unspoken expectations that might be shaping her decisions. Because when you see only the surface, you miss the deeper pattern. But when you recognize that there are external forces at play, you begin to understand why behavior is not always consistent, why signals are not always clear, why connection can feel strong in one moment and uncertain in another. And that understanding changes how you interpret what you see. It removes confusion. It replaces assumption with awareness. Because now you're not just reacting to behavior, you're understanding what might be influencing it. And that level of awareness allows you to remain steady, unreactive, grounded, even when things don't seem clear, because you're no longer relying on surface signals alone. You're seeing the bigger picture. And when you see the bigger picture, everything becomes more controlled, more intentional, more aligned. Because connection is not just about what you do, it's about what you understand, what you recognize, what you see beyond what is obvious. And when you begin to see that clearly, you stop being affected by uncertainty. You stop being pulled by inconsistency. You stop trying to force clarity where it doesn't yet exist. And instead, you remain steady, present, aware. Because you understand that connection is not built on a single moment. It is shaped over time, through multiple layers, some visible, some hidden, but all of them working together to determine how she feels and how she responds. And when you understand that, you move differently, not with force, not with pressure, but with a level of clarity that most men never reach, because they never look deep enough to see what's really happening beneath the surface.